I call the special meeting to order and welcome everyone who's here in person as well as anyone who is watching virtually. For the record, all members of the Town Council are here today, but you may not know them personally, so I'm going to ask if they would state their name from left to right so you know who they are and you can come after them.
Hi. Yeah, that's right. Hi, I'm Scott Edmonston.
Patrick Shepley.
Jerry Morris.
Rosemary Hardiman.
Lou Kilmer.
Ron Califf.
Good afternoon. Mickey Hinman.
Cliff Gravier, Town Manager.
Town Manager. Thank you. And also with us today, we have Terry Tiemann, our Assistant Town Manager, in the back of the room, and Molly Daisy, the Town Clerk. And we also have Will Wharton, our IT person over there, and Brian over there with him. We're pleased also today to have with us Mr. Jim Lober. He's with the engineering firm of Mott MacDonald. And before he makes his presentation, if you just give me a minute, I just wanted to put this in context. There are two special meetings this afternoon, this one at 3 o'clock and another one at 5 o'clock, regarding to review the plans and to solicit public comment regarding the creation of a continuous and connected pedestrian pathway along Collins Street to Kent and then to Wellington Parkway. This 3 o'clock meeting will be specifically dedicated to the proposed pathway on Kent and Wellington, and there'll be a separate meeting at 5 o'clock to go over the plans and to solicit comment on the Collins Street portion. And just to give you an idea how this meeting will be conducted, Mr. Lober will present the proposed plan for the pathway, and following his presentation, he'll take questions from the council and then from the audience. After the questions have been asked and answered, anyone interested in addressing the council with comments regarding the plan may do so. And if you wish to speak, we ask that you sign in on the sheet in the back of the room there, because we'll be calling people from that. We ask that during the question period, you ask questions and save your comments for later. Everyone who wishes to have the opportunity to comment following the question and answer period will have that opportunity. And in order to give everyone the opportunity to speak, we ask that you limit your comments to about approximately 3 minutes. And if you simply agree with something that someone has previously stated, that you just say that. The meeting is being recorded and broadcast live, so please speak clearly into the microphone and give your name and your Bethany Beach address.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes,
right now we're having issues with our Granicus platform,
okay.
and so we are available on YouTube. And I don't know,
Yeah.
and unfortunately anybody that's trying to view on Granicus isn't going to be hearing that, and I don't know how we direct them to YouTube, but YouTube is up for live, and we're trying to deal with the problem with Granicus, which is the town's platform.
And it will be recorded as well.
It'll be
for-
recorded,
yeah.
yes,
Okay, so there would be the opportunity, if they weren't able to get on, to be able to view it.
yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. From the comments we've received, it's obvious that there are differences of opinion regarding the proposal, and we in Bethany Beach pride ourselves in listening to one another respectfully and civilly, even if we don't agree with what's being said, and I'm sure that will be the case today. So if you intend to speak or haven't already done so, please sign up now in the back of the room. And if you sign up and decide later on that you don't want to speak, that's fine as well. At least your name is there and you'll be called. So anyway, thank you. And with that, do you have anything to say, Mr. Grappier?
Jim Lober has been a town engineer with the town for at least 16, 17, 18 years, I believe. Previously with the firm of the Kircher Group, and now with Mott MacDonald. He has been involved with our street designs, our street design on South Atlantic. Did work earlier for us on an earlier proposal regarding Collins that occurred previous to 2010, and also did our workup that was presented to the town council and to the community in 2019. We have tasked Mr. Lober to come back to us one more time. You'll recall in the January 2019, the council voted unanimously to put a 5-foot wide pedestrian pathway on Collins. Subsequently, COVID happened, access to our engineers were limited, access to DelDOT was limited, but as COVID went away, we were able to generate a really positive dialogue with DelDOT, and DelDOT became willing to help us with our project. One of the criticisms of the project when we discussed it in 2019, that the Collins pathway was a path to nowhere, that people would be brought to Kent, and then Kent wouldn't be safe, and there would be nowhere for them to go. But DelDOT is now working with us, because we're paying, to help us create a pedestrian pathway on Kent to Wellington. At Wellington, there will be a flashing pedestrian beacon, and then a 5-foot pathway on Wellington in the 300 block on the south side, taking you to another beacon at Route 1. So now it's a complete path, takes you across Route 1 and takes you to the pathway in the 200 block of Wellington. We've asked Mr. Lober to come back, explain the project from his perspective as an engineer, an overview, and then to take questions. Jim?
May I just say one thing before we proceed? For those of you who thought there was going to be a vote today, there is no vote today. This is merely a presentation and an opportunity to comment. That question was asked. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Cliff mentioned, I was back here in 2019, made practically the exact same presentation, standing on that side of the room at the time, so it feels like a little bit of deja vu. Didn't recreate the wheel with the presentation, so I hope this doesn't bore you guys if you were here the last time. But the project is similar, slightly larger, and so there wasn't a ton of difference that we could make. The first thing I'd like to point out is just to give you a little bit of perspective. I'm sure we're all familiar with the boundaries of the town, but from a purpose of, and I mentioned this the last time, and I like to say the 30,000-foot view. I'm an engineer. I look down on plans from an aerial view all the time, and it really does lend a big picture perspective. So what you see here is the town of Bethany, from the northern boundaries, the ocean on the east on the right, the Assawoman Canal on the west on the left, and then when we get into Sea Colony to the bottom on the south end. So then here is the project, length of the project highlighted. So Collins beginning at Half Moon on the west side of Half Moon there, coming east to Kent, turning south on Kent, and then turning east again on Wellington to Coastal Highway. Here are all of the lots that theoretically would need to use that path along Collins if they wanted to make their way east to the beach. I think this really does an excellent job of showing you just how much of a channelization there is there for all of those residential lots. Those residential lots represent 27% of all of the residential lots in the town. So more than a quarter of the people are in that area, and all of them, if they're coming east, are most likely going to use Collins to head in that direction. So studies were done, and this is a long-term basis for the justification for this project. DelDOT started back in 2004 with what they termed a pedestrian and bicycle study. They followed that up immediately the year after with a transportation circulation study, which built on the numbers that they collected during the initial study, and went a little farther to look into actual circulation patterns and recommended fixes for problems that they identified. A little bit later, about 10 years later, we were brought on in 2014, and then in successive summers 14, 15, and 16 to collect additional traffic volume and speed data. And then in 2017 to take that data that we had collected over the course of those 3 years and put it together into an analysis of how we could provide some traffic calming for the areas in question. So what was identified through 2 different DelDOT studies, our study, and multiple years worth of data collection was that obviously, no surprise to anybody, Collins, Kent, Wellington, major pedestrian thoroughfare. Tons of people using that area. There are no existing pedestrian facilities on any of those streets. They did identify that there's likely some cross-through traffic that splits off of 26 into Bethany West and uses that route as a cut-through to get to Route 1. And they identified that the lack of separation between the vehicles and the pedestrians was the primary safety concern. So the recommendations that came out of all of that analysis and study were that the most important thing was to widen the pavement and create separate pedestrian and vehicle facilities. And then also on top of that, to incorporate some traffic control elements to increase the safety and reduce the speed through that little corridor. So that brings us to the elements of the project, and this is where it's slightly different than the presentation that we made in 2019. But there's going to be an additional 8 feet total of paving on Collins from Half Moon to Kent. That's going to be made up of 5 feet on the south side and 3 feet on the north side. There's not a road widening. All 8 feet that are being added to the road are being used by the pedestrian path. There's currently 20 feet right now, 10 feet on each side for a travel lane. There will be 10 feet on each side for travel lanes when we're finished, and 8 feet for the pedestrian path along Collins. The road needs to shift to the north a little bit to accommodate that. Along Kent, there will be an additional 5 feet of paving from Collins to Wellington. There's currently a 5-foot shoulder there now, which will become the bike lane. There'll be additional 5 feet installed outside of that to the west, which will become the pedestrian path. And then when you get to, when you make the turn and you come down to Wellington, there'll be an additional 5 feet of paving on the south side of Wellington that takes you to Coastal Highway. At the intersection of Wellington and Kent, we're going to install a rapid flashing beacon signal like the ones that you have here on Coastal Highway. It'll be pedestrian operated, button push to engage the beacon and create the signal. There will be the paint stripes on the road, just like any other typical crosswalk that you see. Along the length of the pathway on Wellington and Collins, there will be raised reflective pavement markers. There are little plastic reflectors that have reflectors that show at a very minor angle, but enough that sunlight and headlights reflect off of them so that it's a very visible marking of the boundary between the travel lane and the pedestrian lane. And then we're also going to add speed humps at the moment. We're going to add 2 of them spaced between Kent and Fairway along Collins. We are working with the town to see if it makes sense and if we should add a few additional ones, but at the moment the project currently includes 2 along that stretch of Collins. So the goals and what we hope comes out of the project is obviously increased safety. The number one point from the beginning for all of this. We hope that we get a little bit of reduction in speed as well. Inevitably, with the longitudinal barriers of stripes that don't exist now and reflective markers that don't exist now, you'll get some semblance of traffic control from that because it'll just be a visual marker to let you know that, hey, there's something going on over there that I need to be careful of. And then when you add the speed humps, we believe that we will end up with significant reduced speeds. A couple of positives about the project is the extent of the project is limited to the public right-of-way. There's nothing happening on private property, nothing permanent at least. We're not taking any property to make this happen. We've got 50-foot right-of-way along Wellington. We've got a stretch of Collins that's got a 40-foot right-of-way, and then a stretch of Collins that's got a 50-foot right-of-way. All of the work is happening within that 40 or 50 feet. And just to build on that, no easements will be necessary either in the long run. The temporary access types of things in order to accomplish the work, but no long-term property taking or permanent easements. And just quickly to address cost, we've done an estimate after working with some contractors to come up with an idea of what we think the construction will be. When you add some contingency to that, we're looking at approximately $800,000 project.
If I might add to that, this is the construction cost. The town is going to budget an additional 17% on top of that for administration from Mott McDonald, the engineer group that's doing this presentation today, and an additional 7% on top of the existing 10% for contingency dollars. And I would add that $940,000 total is being paid for entirely by grant monies that the town has obtained for the project.
So that's all I have as far as the basic presentation. I'm happy to have any questions, talk to you all about it.
Thank you, Mr. Lober. Are there any questions, council members? Mr. Shepley?
I have heard in other meetings that there is a difference between speed humps and speed bumps.
Okay.
One being, it's my understanding, one being taller, higher, and cause more of a issue driving over it. Are these the lower, or what we're proposing, the lower humps or the taller bumps?
That is an excellent question. What we're proposing is the DelDOT standard speed hump. I honestly don't know in the world of speed bump humps whether they're considered to be lower or higher.
Okay.
Anybody else? Mr. Hinman?
Yes, when you look at that, I'm glad you have that picture back up. Does that include, I'm trying to, I actually live back there. Does that include Turtle Walk as well, what's in red?
No, it doesn't. And when you include Turtle Walk, there's a total of 787, almost 800 affected homes. And there is the pathway that does connect Turtle Walk to Bethany West.
Turtle Walk's the first community outside of Bethany, is that what it is?
No, it's immediately, it's here in the corner, immediately to the left of your colored area.
Got it. Oh, got it.
Thank you.
If not, I wouldn't be on council, so I live in Turtle Walk.
Anybody else? Okay, anybody from the audience have questions? And this will just be the question portion. Comments will follow. Yes, now, can you give, does anybody have a microphone to give to Mr. Trodden, please?
Thank you. Steve Trodden, 308 Wellington. Just two questions.
Sure.
Do you propose any traffic calming on Wellington as the first part? Second question, totally unrelated, but the construction of the proposed pathway, I think it's asphalt, and is it continuous asphalt? In other words, you don't stop at any driveways or anything, or do you?
Gotcha. Okay, so the first question, the only traffic calming elements at the moment that we're proposing on Wellington are the paint stripe that's gonna separate the travel lane from the pathway and the reflectors that are in that paint stripe. We are considering the additional speed humps. We have not come to that conclusion essentially yet with the discussions with the town. As far as the construction of the pathway, it's gonna honor the existing condition at every driveway unless it's gravel. So if we come across a gravel driveway, we're gonna pave it. If we come across a concrete driveway, we're gonna put concrete back. If we come across a brick paver driveway, we're gonna put brick pavers back. So, well, wait, let me fix that. I'm sorry, the path itself is gonna be asphalt. Whatever repairs we need to make, we're gonna honor the repairs. So the 5 feet that we're adding is going to be asphalt. If that asphalt path crosses a concrete driveway, inevitably you have to cut out a little bit more than just the path to physically get the work done. We're gonna replace the concrete that we take out with concrete. We're gonna replace the brick pavers, whatever fancy type of additional improvements that are there, we're gonna replace those outside of the 5 feet. The 5 feet itself will be asphalt.
So, Mr. Trodden, it's 5-foot continuous blacktop.
Right.
Properties will be restored, and I would offer to anyone that has that concern to take a look at South Atlantic. We did our project in South Atlantic here 3 or 4 years ago. It's complete. And every driveway that was paved and every entry was restored to the owner's satisfaction. And we went back on some properties 8, 9, 10, or 12 times to make sure the owners were satisfied with the transition from the project to their property.
Thank you, Cliff. Let me just play back to you and make sure I heard your answer correctly. What I'm hearing is if you have a paver driveway, which we do, which now runs all the way to the street, now it'll run to a 5-foot asphalt pedestrian walkway?
Yes, but that 5-foot pedestrian asphalt walkway is just essentially an extension of the street. The street edge essentially is just gonna be 5 feet closer than it was before.
Got you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else with a question? Terry?
Right there.
No, no.
Where is the crosswalk going to be on Kent onto Wellington? Will it be right at the library entrance, or?
It will be just north of the library entrance. The library entrance is
Okay.
actually just south of where Wellington comes in. So the crosswalk the path will go south of Wellington, won't get to the library entrance yet, and then it'll turn left, come across Kent to the south side of Wellington.
Porous paver driveway, all the way out to the asphalt street. What are you going to do about my pavers? Are you going to tear them up and run your blacktop?
The last 5 feet of your pavers, as they approach the existing edge of the road, will be removed, and five new feet of asphalt will be placed. And we can, as far as from a construction method standpoint, we can take those out carefully, and we'll be able to give them to you so that you can use them to patch your driveway in the future, but they will no longer be the last 5 feet of review.
Well, that's not really aesthetic to, like beautifying Bethany Beach, I mean, you put a blacktop asphalt in place of the pavers, that's gonna look ugly.
Everybody has subjective opinions. Essentially, the road's just getting wider.
Well, I don't agree with the project. I don't think it's really necessary to do all these pathway improvements. I really haven't seen any pedestrians have collisions with cars on Wellington Parkway, because I usually sit out on my porch quite often watching the beachgoers coming down Wellington to the beach and going home again. And it seems like the pedestrians, the beachgoers, and the drivers, they manage to take and work around the safety issues. So I really don't see it necessary to have these pathways put in on Wellington. And Kent, like the woman said, the crossover from the Kent Avenue onto Wellington, the diagonal drawings you have are going to be more severe getting from the north side of Kent Avenue to the south side of Wellington Parkway. And this is going to interfere with traffic going into the library. It's going to have repercussions to traffic on Kent. And, if it all is going to happen, it would be better to have the pathway cross Kent onto the north side of Wellington. So anyway, my
Thank you.
comments. And then the speed bumps on Wellington. I agree with speed bumps on Wellington, and the emergency vehicle traffic can go up Oakwood, because Oakwood is not used as often as Wellington during the summer months. The summer months, Wellington is one of the major routes for beachgoers. And read the write-up that was sent around, and the overhead pedestrian warning signals and vehicle signals on one, they're terrible. And if you were going to put something on Kent, use the ones like they have up in Rehoboth, where you actually have a red traffic signal stopping traffic, because on Route 1, the drivers don't know whether they should stop, slow down, or continue. And same way with pedestrians. I don't step out on Route 1 while the yellow lights are flashing. So that's something to think about. And also, we got a problem with, this is something in addition to vehicles, dump trucks, tractor trailers, they bypass Wellington Parkway. And it's a problem in the summertime when beachgoers are using the Wellington Parkway. And I think that there should be a prohibition of using heavy vehicles on Wellington. So anyway, I spoke my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefton. This is going to be for questions.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I have underground,
Oh, could you identify yourself, please?
oh, I'm sorry, Susan Pappas, 304 Wellington on the south side. And I have some underground lighting that comes on automatically to uplight the landscaping. If you disturb that, will you replace the underground lighting?
Absolutely. We would not have been able to find that when we did our surveys. We'll ask that you point it out to us.
You'll leave me a note of who to call and say it's not working, come back and fix it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question? I guess, thank you.
Laura Irwin, 409 Collins. Does the asphalt have any component or characteristics of being porous to absorb?
At the moment, no. We are considering that. It's one of the essentially construction options that are in the mix at the moment. Whether the asphalt that we were proposing was porous. Permeable, essentially.
The concern is there's already a lot of standing water in the town of Bethany Beach, and adding more asphalt will only create more groundwater runoff and cover ground that's absorbing water.
I don't believe that, was that a question? The answer is, at the moment, we're considering it. We haven't decided what the final pavement material will be. It's gonna be asphalt. Is it gonna be open section to allow some water to flow through? Significantly more expensive. We haven't made that decision yet.
In our discussions with our Public Works Department and our engineer, and we have asked the council here on recent multiple occasions to take the drive on Collins and on Wellington immediately after a rain event, look at the amount of standing water, and then within 24 to 36 hours, look at the amount of infiltration. There is not a significant problem compared to many other areas in Bethany Beach with standing or puddling water on Collins and Wellington. There is some at certain locations, most specifically on the west side of the water plant, and some puddling right in Kent, right at the corner of Wellington. But that falls to DelDOT, and DelDOT has not been able to take care of that. But there's not significant ongoing puddling from the town's perspective and Public Works perspective. So the consideration for pervious is probably not something we're going to take a look at, because the additional costs could range from anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 additional dollars.
Regina Trodden, 308 Wellington. A number of years ago, when we put the pavers in that were pervious, we also had French drains put all along the area between the street and our property, which was, quote, town property. We had them dig down 18 inches and put gravel all through there, because we always had standing water in front of our house. Now I hear that you're going to cover that over with asphalt. So the things we did to mitigate the water are going to be wiped away.
We'll move the French drain back, so as part of the project, they would recreate that at the very edge of the blacktop. So you would still have the same benefit that you have today, where your paver meets the blacktop.
Okay, one other question. When we did that, we used to have grass there. It was town property, but nobody ever parked on the grass. Now, we've provided at least 3 parking spots, maybe 4, when we put the gravel rather than the grass. Now I'm hearing that if it's a walkway, we'll lose 4 parking spaces. Is that correct?
So there will be no parking on the pathway.
Okay, I mean, it's not...
At the edge of the pathway, there'll still be 5 feet of public right-of-way between the edge of the pathway and your property line. So, but we'll mark the pathway on the south side of the road as no parking, so people do not park in the path.
Any other questions? There's someone in the back of the room there.
She wants to go.
Rod Gowan, 401 Collins Street. A question about this term right-of-way. I looked at the deed of my property. I don't see the town of Bethany on my property deed. I don't see any easements or mentions of a right-of-way. How does the right-of-way get granted to the town? What is the document that conveys that right-of-way to the town of Bethany Beach?
I honestly don't know what document conveyed the streets originally to the town of Bethany Beach. I do know, as an engineer that does subdivision and land development plans, we record we record record plans to create subdivisions, to create land development plans. And when we do that, the right-of-ways get set aside, labeled as to be dedicated to public use. And then there are deeds that change hands between the developer, the owner of the property, and the town, the municipality that is taking over those roads, and they become public rights-of-way, public property to be owned and maintained by the.
So that may be a question for the town, because I understand what he just said, but what is the document by virtue of how is this right-of-way given to the town of Bethany Beach?
We'll have our solicitor, and we've had the question asked a couple of times. People, though, have been more specific, asking for book and page numbers for plats. So our solicitor is putting something together. I can tell you the town owns the town streets. They're all dedicated and part of our official map. The town has to go through a lengthy process to alter or to divest itself of any street, legislative process that has to be approved by Superior Court. So we've been through this before with other issues, and unequivocally, the town owns its streets. So
Well-
at the edge of your property line to the next property line across the street is town-owned public right-of-way.
Well, I kind of would like to see that, and I
Sure.
think our residents would like to see that, because a surveyor locally told me that when the 26 project was done, that some of that property was taken by eminent domain, and as a result of that, those owners were compensated, fee simple, for those property square footage that they lost.
May have happened, that was a Delaware Department of Transportation project, but very clearly, the 40-foot right-of-way on Collins prior to the water plant and the 50-foot right-of-way that's within Bethany West are dedicated town-owned streets.
Gotcha. I'd appreciate if you could
Sir.
update us on that and show us how
We'll-
that is all
we'll do
created.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I, just to clarify that, this plan doesn't take any private property. It's all within public
Absolutely not.
property, right?
As a point of clarification, Wellington is 50-foot wide. The addition of the 5-foot pathway takes the blacktop portion of the roadway to 25 feet. There'll still be 5 foot of public right-of-way on the south side and 10 feet of public right-of-way on the north side. When you move to Collins, in the 40-foot portion of Collins, on the south side, there'll be 5 foot of public right-of-way left and 7 foot of public right-of-way left on the north side. When you get past the water plant and the street becomes 50 foot wide, there's 8 to 10 feet of public right-of-way left on the south side of the road and 10 to 12 feet. The road varies as it approaches intersections, 10 to 12 feet on the north side. So there is still substantial public right-of-way left on both north and south side of the project on its entire route.
Are there any other questions? Over there.
Rita Sargis, 400 Collins Street. How, if a car parks in the path, in the pedestrian path, how will that be enforced that they shouldn't be parking there?
It'll be marked and the police will ticket it, so.
Are there any other questions before we start with the comments? Yes, over on the right here.
Did the study include anything to discourage, the gentleman up front brought up weight of certain vehicles, like certain vehicles that are using streets for cross-through? So just to try to discourage that cut-through traffic?
I don't believe that the weight of or the size of the vehicles were considered in the analysis. I believe it was purely volume, number of trips, essentially.
Did the traffic counts differentiate between like passenger vehicles and?
They may have. I honestly don't know off
vehicles?
the top of my head.
Is that data available in those
It is.
studies?
It's a public study that DelDOT did back in 2004.
2004?
Yeah.
And could you provide a link to where that
Could you
can
speak
be?
into the microphone,
Could you
please?
provide a link to where that 2004 data is available?
I don't have it personally. I'm sure we could track it down.
Okay, thanks.
And then there's one over on that side over there, Terry. No, you do need a microphone because this is being recorded, sir. Thank you.
I'm just going to make a comment.
Name, please.
I'm Bill Linlaw. I'm the president of Bethany Proper's Homeowners Association. Bethany Proper South,
Is this a question or a comment?
a comment.
No, comments come later.
Oh, there is a comment?
Yes, yeah, we're not into that yet. Thank you.
Okay, well, let me just ask a question then.
Okay,
All right.
good.
We feel, and it's effective here, crossing at Route 1, even with the blinking light, is a problem because so many people drive so fast on Route 1. And I just want to make sure that everyone's aware with more volume, hopefully more volume going to the blinking light, that the law says stop when people are in a crosswalk. And so many times, one car stops and the other doesn't. And I've seen personally 3 or 4 people at Ashwood Street almost get killed or hit with the cars. And the blinking light helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. And all the blocks south of town that have crossways have problems. We feel we have a big problem. And I think that the town should be aware that so much of that goes on where people are crossing and you think it's safe and it's not safe. So I just want to, it's kind of a question comment, but I think the board should be aware that that is increasingly every year with more traffic and higher speeds, it's a problem.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions? Questions?
Hi, I just wanted to get clarification on the cost. I understood the cost that was...
Excuse me, could you hold it by your mouth and
sorry,
keep it there?
sorry,
Thank
sorry.
you.
The cost of the total project, but at one point there was a description of what the town was paying. Was that the town paying for the engineering studies? I had it early on in my notes. Oh, the town is paying to work with DelDOT, what I think was the comment?
So the work on Kent Avenue is part of the project, but Kent Avenue is a DelDOT-owned highway. So the enhancement to Kent, the pedestrian flashing beacon, the piano keys, and the other work that will take the road down Kent into Wellington, even though it's on DelDOT-owned property, will be paid for by the town and is part of the numbers that we spoke about earlier.
Okay, but is there a cost for hiring the current engineering?
Yes, there's been cost associated with his work to date, and then there'll be cost involved at a number of about 10% for them to oversee the project. And that's included in the $940,000 number that we spoke of earlier.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we start with the comments? There's one over here.
Getting a good workout there.
My steps in. My Apple Watch doesn't know what.
Hi, Charlie Skinner, 738 Half Moon Drive. Where are bicycles expected to remain where there's not the dedicated bike path? I think that's only on Kent, correct? Are they to stay with cars, or are they free to go either place? What's the deal?
I don't know that it's illegal for them to use the pedestrian path. I think at 8 feet, it might be difficult for them to share it. I think at the end of the day, we are hoping that they use it mindfully along with the pedestrians and stay out of the road. Likely, they'll probably still be sharing the road.
The town viewed it as a multi-use path. When we got to Kent, again, we were driven by what the state regulates. The state would not allow us to put a multi-use path in that was only 8 feet wide. Ideally, we would take more of the right-of-way, but we don't want to create more problems with homeowners, so we tried to strike a balance in the width of the pathway on Collins at only 8 feet instead of making it 10 to 12 as we did on South Atlantic.
A question?
Hi, my name is Kathy Savino. I live on Collins Street. These studies can't be that unusual. How do we know it's a success? In other words, you know, the painted lines sometimes, are they better than, say, a sidewalk? Or how do you tease out what works, and how will we identify that it's successful?
That's a very good question. The design elements of pedestrian improvements are very subjective. There are people, and I was having this conversation with the council earlier, there are professionals who believe you should never cross or mix bicycles and pedestrians because the bicycles become dangerous to the pedestrians. And then there are people who believe that it's perfectly fine. And so some people think you should have concrete and some people think you should have asphalt because it's a continuous material. It really all comes down to construction cost, available space, and relying at the end of the day on the common sense of the user. As far as a measurable for how we think it's going to succeed, I would hope that maybe there'll be a buzz around town and people will talk about it and say, yeah, I really enjoy my walk from, from Half Moon to the beach these days. It's much safer. I don't know that there's I guess theoretically we could spend some money to do an analysis and stand there and count pedestrians much like we did, or I should say DelDOT did in 2004 again, but this time discern whether they're actually using the path or not. But yeah, there's no concrete answer.
Thank you.
Is it a question? Okay. And no comment? Terry?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Galacta has a question.
I should throw it.
Steve Galata again, 310 Wellington Parkway. Is there any question about reducing the speed limit on Kent or Wellington for this project?
The town does not have the ability to officially, enforceably reduce speed limits below 25 mile per hour on residential streets.
Well, I think it would be a good idea to take and lower the speed limit.
The
And
state,
it can't be done
the state
because
doesn't, the state doesn't allow us to do it. It's not enforceable.
Well, we can ask the state to do it because I was at McDonald's this morning and I rode up the back street that parallels Route 1, and a lot of those streets are 15-mile-an-hour speed limits, so they got authority to do it somehow.
No, they didn't. They just simply posted it. Turtle Walk is posted at 17 miles an hour?
17, yeah.
17 miles an hour. So
It's not
you can,
enforceable.
you can post anything you would like, but it's not
But
enforceable.
don't you think it would be a good idea to reduce the speed?
The town council voted some time ago to universally throughout the town lower speed limits on signs to 20 miles per hour. But at the same time they did that, the mayor and our vice mayor began a dialogue with the Delaware League of Local Governments to see if the DelDOT could be convinced to allow municipalities to use a different formula for speed limits on residential streets. So that's an ongoing issue, something they're doing that would be far more effective to be able to legally lower the speed limits to 20 miles per hour and actually enforce it than us posting it, not being able to enforce it.
Yeah, we have one of those digital speed limit signs on Wellington on both sides, north and south side. And I sit out my front porch a lot. And let me tell
Is
you.
this a question?
Well, have you ever been on Wellington to watch the traffic go up and down? I've seen them go 50 miles an hour down Wellington.
You
So
know,
you
just
should
to-
consider lowering the
Just to follow up on that and the work that Mr. Kilmer and I have been doing with the Delaware League, there are about 9 states right now in the United States that have allowed municipalities to lower the speed limit to 20 miles an hour on their streets. But in order to do that, you need to make legislative changes, and you need to make changes to what they call the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices in each state, because that's what controls, and that's what says if you want to lower the speed limit, you have to do a speed study. Well, the speed study that calls for in that manual is an 85th percentile. So they set the speed limit at the speed at which 85% of the automobiles are traveling during that study. Now, when they did the study in Bethany, part of the study, I called all my friends and said, please, go 15 miles an hour all around town and just keep circling town until I tell you to stop. But it didn't work. But anyway, that's the problem. The problem is that it calls for legislative change, and it calls for changes to the manual. And
Bureaucracy.
it does, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting me
Thank
put in
you.
that commercial. Now, before we begin, oh, there's another question? Boots, you only get 3 questions.
She's down for comments.
Thank you. So wouldn't it be prudent, rather than waiting for all the time that and rigmarole that it would take to have this enforced, just to put up some signs, which they do in many places, even if it's not enforceable? Wouldn't it be prudent just to go ahead and do that? Because people, there's ever increasing traffic, and people in the summer who maybe have only been here once or will only be here once, will see that, and it'll say, 15 miles an hour, and they'll say, okay. Or even the sign could say, no through traffic, or local traffic only. Even if it's not enforceable, isn't it prudent to just go ahead and do that and not enforce it, but hope for the best?
If I may, this was one of the hot topics the last time we all gathered to talk about the pathway on Collins. We don't, looking at a 25 mile per hour speed limit, we don't have a speeding problem on either Collins or Wellington. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of cars, and we have multiple studies, some much more recent studies than 04 and 05 studies, that indicate the majority of cars travel 21, 22, 23 miles per hour on both Collins and Wellington. The vast majority, there's a minute percentage of cars that actually travel 10 miles over the speed limit. So the problem isn't speeding. The problem, especially for Collins, is the width of the roadway and the number of cars, bicycles, and pedestrians that use the roadway. And that transfers over to Wellington also, where hundreds of people use Wellington as a cut-through to go east and west.
Are we ready for comments? No more questions? Okay, we have the people who signed up to provide comments. If you could come over here to this microphone and identify yourselves when I call your name. The first is Steve and Jen, is it Ryal? No longer. Okay, thank you. Maria Dawson? Oh, okay. That's okay. Mr. Steve Trodden?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Steve Trodden, 308 Wellington. I'm up here really to make two kinds of comments. One, a bigger picture thing. And secondly, if you're unpersuaded by my rationale, to ask for some personal kind of help. But on a bigger picture thing, I don't deny that there's a lot of pedestrian traffic on Wellington, and it'll probably get worse in the years to come. I think there's a real irony here, and this is a totally subjective argument. I confess, I don't know how anybody would measure this. But my personal opinion is that pedestrians in larger numbers are safer than pedestrians in limited numbers. And by that I mean, if you're coming down Kent and you turn onto Wellington, if there's a crowd of people in the street, you better damn well hit your brakes. If there's a few pedestrians and they're off on the new pathway or under existing circumstances, and they should somehow veer out into the roadway, those are the people that I think are at risk. I can't prove this, but I can tell you that I am entirely in favor of pedestrian safety in any measure that would effectively improve it. I have no doubt that everybody involved in this plan and this project is well-intentioned in trying to do exactly that. But I rise simply because I'm dubious that it's going to work. And by that I mean, I sit at 308 Wellington and I watch all these beachgoers go to the beach and come back from the beach. And even though for at least 3 or 4 streets, my property, 3 or 4 residences, my property included, there's a walkable area to the right of the pathway, to the south side of the pathway. They don't use it. And I'm not sure they're going to be using it when you put your 5-foot worth of asphalt in there. To make this really graphic, I have grandkids and I have great-grandkids, and I take them to the beach. I never walk on the south side of Wellington. I want to get over on the north side so I can face traffic coming at me. I never want one of my grandkids to make a sudden bolt out into the roadway with traffic coming behind them if they were walking on the south side of Wellington. I think that's a real concern. There's an existing walkway on the east side of number 1. I don't see that used very often by many people. I see cars parked on it a lot. And I personally, again, never walk on that pathway. I walk on the other side of the street so I can see traffic coming at me. And what I envision in the future with this increasing pedestrian traffic going both ways on Wellington, and I presume Collins as well, you're coming down the pedestrian walkway on the south side of Wellington, and there's not just bikes and there's not just people, but there's dune buggies, some of the contraptions that people use to take their umbrellas and their chairs and what have you are pretty inventive and pretty big. So if you're walking on the south side of Wellington toward the beach, and coming at you is one of these big dune buggies, I'll call them, you're very likely to swerve out into the roadway and unobservant about the traffic, car traffic that might be coming behind you. I hate to predict a fatality or an injury, but it seems to me more likely to happen than in the existing circumstance. That's all I have to say about it. I question the effectiveness of the proposed project, whether it's really going to work and whether it's really going to reduce accidents or increase them. Now, on a personal level, and I speak, I think, for a couple of neighbors on either side of me, I don't quite understand why which is why I asked the question earlier about whether the 5-foot asphalt is continuous. It would seem to me if you come up to an attractive driveway, a paver driveway like mine, for which I did spend a lot of money, I did it not to make it attractive, I did it to reduce the water problem we have. And I heard Mr. Gravier's comments, but Cliff, I gotta argue against you. We did have major water there in heavy rainstorms. We still get them today, but it does dissipate much quicker than it used to, because I got this 1.5 foot worth of French drain gravel in there, plus the permeable pavers. But anyhow, my point is, if you're coming along with your 5-foot asphalt walkway, and you come up to an attractive driveway, why do you have to rip it out, plow across with the asphalt, and then put whatever you disturbed back? Why can't you just stop at the attractive driveway and pick up? It's a very walkable thing, so you're not improving any walkability by a continuous asphalt pathway. It would seem you might even be cheaper if you don't have to dig that driveway up and then replace something. You save the asphalt, and I would think you could stop right at the edge of the driveway and go on. And then lastly, the point was made earlier, I think it would be a much more attractive option for the town of Bethany Beach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trodden. Mr. Edgar. Okay, thank you. Bill Lindlaw? Okay. Steve? Okay. Mr. Gowan? Okay. Boots Sargis?
I'd like to say ditto to everything Steve just said. And I want to also thank you for all your hard work. And, you know, we know this is, you know, a contentious issue, and we're just really grateful that you're open to hearing what we have to say. There have been a couple comments about the lack of safety, and I think that's how many people feel. We feel like that we're all on board. We all want people to be safe. We truly do. And we feel that this actually would be less safe, this plan. And for a variety of reasons, a couple of them have already been expressed. Another thing that my husband pointed out is the new vehicles are much quieter. So if people are walking and the traffic is coming from behind them, they may not hear that. And human nature being what it is, they're going to step over that painted line. I mean, anybody that lives on Collins or Wellington and who has observed people walking to and from the beach will just tell you that, you know, they're talking to each other, their families, their large groups, and they are not necessarily going to say, oh, there's the yellow line, I'm going to stay there. So, you know, I also agree that I think it's more dangerous to have the pedestrian pathway. Another issue is that the traffic apps will be bringing people through Collins and maybe Wellington. So the traffic is increasing and probably will continue to increase. So if you increase traffic and you increase the number of pedestrians, then maybe you're making for a much less safe situation. Let's see, was there anything else? And the last thing I wanted to say was that a group of people who kind of all agree with each other on Collins have put together a letter, and you can sign it online. So, and I have copies of it, so if you'd like to have a copy of the letter, or sign the letter online, or sign it here, you know, I'm sitting over there in the back. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane Switzer?
Hello, Janie Switzer, 318 Wellington. This grant money, does it ever expire?
Does the grant money expire?
The grant money will be good into '24 for us, into 2024.
2024, and are there other, is it specifically for pedestrian safe and biking safety? Or are there other options that you can use the grant money for?
We asked for, and the money at this point in time has been identified for this specific project. Whether or not we can go back and change that, I'm not sure.
Is there a project for Jefferson Bridge to also receive traffic quieting?
That would be DelDOT, so I'm not sure what's going on at Jefferson Bridge Road.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. That's all of the people who have signed up to comment. Is there anyone else who didn't sign up? I'm sorry? I don't see it. What's your name? No?
Oh, come up.
No, but you can come up and talk. Yeah. And please identify yourself and your address, and speak into the microphone.
Laura Irwin, 409 Collins. Ditto on the suggestion of a walkway. We also observe a lot of people and that walk in large groups that are pulling carts and pushing strollers that take up large amounts. So I just think the suggestion will be just that, and people will continue their human nature. The first question I had is, I know that lowering traffic mile per hour is not enforceable, but what about weight restrictions and actually cut through traffic? Is that enforceable if there's a sign that says, I mean, it could be something that people would ignore, but we observe a lot of the like trades and contractors that cut through. Is that something that is enforceable if it's identified as restricted use for local only?
There's some issues with local only. I think we've addressed that in the past, and
I would say as far as trades.
Mr.
and
Lober,
types of
could you?
vehicles- I
Thank you.
apologize. As far as trades types of vehicles, those vehicles are not going to exceed a threshold by which a weight limit would affect them. They might be larger than you want to see a typical passenger vehicle, but they're by no means considered heavy.
And then what about cut through?
The cut through, we talked about this in 2019. It's a public right of way. It's available to people to use it. There's really no way to limit.
And then what about GPS blocking? Like a lot of the GPS will route people alternate ways, but we live in a place where there's a lot of government and military installations, and even now along 50 as you approach the Bay Bridge, there's now Waze is now blocked from offering alternate routes. Has that also been considered?
no, we have never considered GPS blocking. So.
Yeah. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There was a gentleman over here.
Thank you. Charlie Skinner, 738 Half Moon. I'm very supportive of the project, and I do think it will be beneficial. We've been using that route for 17 years, and would like to continue, and I think it'll be an improvement, but I think speed bumps are the key missing ingredient that would accomplish a lot of what people are concerned about. The speed bumps we have on Oakwood between Route 1 and Pennsylvania, you can't go 25 on that block. If we have speed bumps that have a similar height and spacing on Collins and Wellington, you will cut the speed limit, in fact, even if the sign and the law is still 25. And when it comes to bicycles, electric bikes are selling like crazy. So bicycles are no longer just, the 10 speeds, and the mountain bikes were the heaviest and fastest. Now you've got bikes that can go 30 miles an hour, and often do. And you see them on 26 on the sidewalk, despite the faded paint saying no bikes on sidewalk. But if they're speed bumps, like with cars, you can slow them down. So I think you'd accomplish a lot of the safety objective with speed bumps. Thank you.
I do, let me make a comment about that since I've been here quite a bit with this subject. We've talked about that in the past, and many of the residents were totally against speed bumps in Long Collins. It was, unless the mood of the neighborhood has changed, they really did not want speed bumps.
Well, I would just comment that for the residents, you're talking about a few seconds of inconvenience.
Right.
That's really not a lot to ask to increase safety significantly. And the same residents are the ones complaining about speeders, right?
Well, I don't know, but my point is, a lot of them were concerned about the noise, boom, 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 so.
Charlie, could I ask you a question? The plan does call for a couple of speed bumps on Collins. Are you saying that you would prefer to see more speed bumps than is in the plan?
Well, I thought there was indication at the last meeting a few weeks ago that they were going to be these rubber temporary things again, not equivalent to the Oakwood speed bumps.
These would be permanent installs.
Yeah.
But now we're asking and have asked the engineer to take a look at Wellington and see what he recommends within the span of Wellington in the 300 block additional speed bumps. But we have really mixed experiences in Bethany with speed bumps from communities or street or residents that wanted them and then just were so unhappy with the noise of vehicles stopping and the noise of vehicles driving over the speed bumps. They actually wanted to pay to have them removed.
Yeah.
So it is truly a mixed bag. Does it have some impact? But I'll reiterate the point that speed on Collins and Wellington isn't as much of an issue as the fact that there's no safe haven. And regardless of the size of the vehicles, if you take two Suburbans or a Yukon and a Suburban driving up and down the 20-foot span of Collins and you're walking or biking on the street, there is no place to go. So at the very least, what we're trying to do is to create some sort of a safe haven, some sort of an alternative if you want to walk in a space that might be safer than being in the street. So speed bumps are part of this. Speed bumps on Wellington will probably be part of it also.
Well, legal speeding may not be an issue, but you indicated the study said the average are going between 21 and 25. And I think sentiment is, it'd be nice
too
if
fast.
they were
Yes.
going 15 or
Yes,
10.
it certainly would be.
So, and if they're on Oakwood, they're not going 21 or 23, they're going 10 to 15, and I think you need more. I think you're only talking about 2 speed bumps on Collins. For that distance, you probably need more like 4. And then maybe 2 or probably 2 on Wellington, I would guess, but that's a similar length to Oakwood, right?
I don't know if 4 speed bumps would be something that the Bethany West community would embrace. I'm not sure, so.
I appreciate your feedback.
Thank you very much. Was there another person over here? Oh. Thank you.
I'm 304 Wellington Parkway, and I just was thinking about what the other neighbor was talking, that if pedestrians are going with the traffic, you can't hear oftentimes cars coming behind you, as opposed to being on the north side when you're coming back and so forth, that it's restricting people to be, or encouraging them all to head to the beach on the south side it's very tricky. I mean, you can't hear, I walk down Route 1, I don't hear bicyclists coming until they're right on top of me. So that's a concern, safety-wise. And the fact that we haven't had any fatalities is something also to be considered, that if it's been fine the way it is, that perhaps saving $1 million would be something for the board to consider.
Thank you very much. Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming today and also for your very thoughtful comments and questions. And those who are listening, this will be slated for the agenda, Town Council agenda for a vote for next Friday, September 20th at 2 o'clock. But I would encourage you, if anyone has additional comments, anyone listening or anyone here, to please send them in as soon as possible. You can email them to admin@townofbethanybeach.com, or you can drop them off at Town Hall or send them to 214 Garfield Parkway, Bethany Beach. Because the comments we read them all, and they are very helpful. So please send them in. And thank you very much again for your thoughtful comments and
Mayor,
participation.
if I may?
Yes.
Did you change the time for next week's meeting?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
No.
All right.
No, it's 2 o'clock. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I think you also said September 20th, but you mean January 20th.
Did I say September?
Just
I
a
was- I
note of
can't fool you.
clarification. Yeah.
Thank you. No, January, thank you. Oh, we don't need to adjourn. We need a motion?
Yeah, I guess so.
Just close the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
It's really a public hearing, so.